What is up, everyone? Welcome into the Fight HQ UFC Orlando preview as we are going to break down tomorrow's UFC Orlando fight card. We did have one fighter miss weight earlier on today in Orlando. We'll talk about that. Of course, you got any questions, be sure to line those up in the chat. We will answer your questions throughout the show. We'll be live here for about the next hour or so. I'm joined by my guy, Pete Rogers Jr. What is up, Pete, man? How you doing, man?
What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Another week of UFC fights. Super excited. The absence sometimes is needed, but it's nice to return to a loaded card. And, we have some more quantity on this card. More fights, more interesting matchups, some aging veterans, like some really, really almost like legends. The past couple weeks. We had Frankie Edgar a couple weeks ago. We have Clay Guida. We have, Darren Elkins, all these guys that are super, just like staples within their divisions. It's kind of interesting.
There are some fights on this card, Pete, that I look at and I go, I feel like they were made for a reason by the UFC to potentially start reducing some of this roster. Because like when I started looking at, the betting odds, the DFS salaries, and I really started looking at this card, I was like, man, there's some spots in here where I could very easily see the loser is going to find their way out of the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly seeing who's, on the up within the promotion, who's getting the promotional push, and who the UFC is strategically using to build careers off of. It's sad. It's the business, though, right? And, there's usually an A side and a B side of the fight, and from a skill standpoint, but also from, a path towards the title or a path towards building a next superstar. So you always have to think of it from a matchmaker and promotional aspect as well, in addition to the skill fighting, and just how the stylistic matchup is. But yeah, I think that you hit the nail right on the head with some of the matchups.
Of course, we appreciate everyone that's tuning in here, right here on the Fight HQ YouTube channel. Of course, show your support for me, myself, and Pete. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. We're going to be here on Fridays before UFC fight cards. Of course, on Saturdays, we'll be over there at Stochastic. So a great way to show your support for what me and Pete are doing here. And look, if there's any content you want to see here on the Fight HQ YouTube channel, just hit up me or Pete. Whether you do it on Twitter, Instagram, here on YouTube, you could do that. And of course, we always appreciate the questions. Scott's already coming in with the question of all these 6K fighters, who has the most DFS upside in a win. And Pete, I'll tell you, when I started looking at these salaries, the first thing that really stuck out to me was like, oh man, we got a ton of 9K fighters over on DraftKings. Like that stuck out to me. I was like, okay. Then like, you almost like, it's one of these things where you're like, okay, who are these like 7,200 and under fighters that you look at? I mean, he's mentioned about the 6K fighters. I mean, I said, me and you were going back and forth this week, and initially my thought was, boy, I think that maybe Brian Barberena is going to be a popular play. But the more I kind of like took a deeper dive in that fight, I was like, okay, for Brian Barberena to have success in that fight, and we're going to talk about this when we break the fight down, like, he's got to allow Rafael Dos Anjos to make this a brawl. I just don't see RDA doing that. I actually think that's I think it's more a FanDuel play personally, just because of from a salary aspect. But I will tell you this, I do like RDA because of the potential takedown aspect of that. Look at the other 6,000 options. Matt Schnell, he's at 6,800. Darren Elkins at 6,700, and Estela Nunez at 6,900.
Yeah, I mean, interesting matchups for the 6K range. Great question. Thank you for the question. We even had Woody in chat checking us out, which is really cool. Brian Barberena, 6,600. He has knockout potential. I just find it pretty hard to see him knocking out Rafael Dos Anjos. I know that he put on a hell of a performance against Robbie Lawler. I don't suspect the same thing to happen in this matchup. Darren Elkins at 6,700. The damage, he is the most experienced of these 6,000 options at 17-9 in the UFC. He's a complete workhorse. he's able to push a pace, sustain a pace, and even in a loss can put up a hell of a score by attempting and landing a ton of takedowns. The issue is that he can get controlled on the mat as well, and he does not wear damage well at all. So I think from a floor standpoint, I would probably say Darren Elkins has the safest floor of these 6,000 options because you have Matt Schnell, super volatile and susceptible, getting hit with a big shot and finished. Was beaten up really, really badly in his previous matchup against Sumer Derji, but came back in the second round and ended up putting together a hell of a performance with ground and pound en route to a submission win. I mean, flyweight divisions usually competitive matchups, limited finishes, but Matt Schnell seems to be like that one fighter within that division where it's like, yeah, if he's in a fight, it seems to be a GPP fight. And Estela Nunes, if you are blindly just playing, I would probably say that women's MMA tends to work out a lot targeting the underdogs. But I actually really like her opponent, so I'm not going to recommend Estela Nunes, despite the fact that she's coming from America Top Team and she's a really, really good, renowned kickboxer. She's just super susceptible to getting taken down and completely out grappled. So I guess my pick in this 6,000 range, even though I still do like Jonathan Pierce, would probably be Darren Elkins from an upside standpoint and a floor standpoint.
Kevin, appreciate your question. He goes, underdog of the week, Valdez. We're on the same page again this week, Pete.
I do like Valdez. I want to say he's my underdog of the week. I do like Valdez, and I'm trying to figure out if I like Valdez a lot because of me not really being the biggest Natan Levy fan as far as like what he does in his output and unable to pull the trigger at times and allow his opponents into the fight, backpedals a lot. I do like Valdez, but there's another underdog that I really, really like, and it's probably due to my bias because he's working with my same striking coach that I worked with for a very long time at when I was out in Jackson's, training and living with Cowboy Cerrone. So I will tell you later on who that underdog is. Let's see if you guys can figure it out.
Kevin, I'll say, and Phil Rowe should be a favorite in my opinion as a cheaper price on DK. I also think Dolidze is sneaky. Phil Rowe missed weight by 3 pounds when he stepped on the scale. He had that look that he knew he wasn't on weight. Dolidze, I will say this, Kevin. Look, he's not a volume puncher. You're hoping for that power punch. He's going to sit on his punches and he's going to fling some power out there. Dolidze is an underdog I do not mind getting to this week.
No, I don't mind getting to him at all, and it's because he hits really hard and he puts that pedal to the metal early. So it's kind of like he comes out so hot out the gate where it catches his opponents off guard. So it happened to Dawkins getting a little too lackadaisical in the clinch. I still personally, I will plant my flag. I still think Dawkins is a better fighter than him. But guess what? The better fighter doesn't always win. And Dolidze was able to go in there and implement his game, just be physical. And being physical is something that, that's kind of his path to victory in a lot. Just impose his will on his opponents. I slightly worry about the short notice nature of this fight for him, just from a longevity standpoint as the fight goes on. As the fight goes long, can he sustain a pace? Does he start to, wilt a little bit to the volume and just the footwork of Jack Hermanson? We shall see. But as far as like underdogs with an upside, I really like him. And the cat's out of the bag. Phil Rowe is the underdog that's working with my coach. So Phil Rowe is my underdog of the week.
Woody thought it was Eric Anders. I did not. Woody, I'll tell you this, man. I did not think that was going to be Pete's pick. Eric is my guy. But look, this is a fight card, by the way, that has several fighters from Fight Ready, which one of the more interesting things I think over the past couple of days, or I would say about the past week or so in MMA, is the fact that Demetrius Johnson has been with Henry Cejudo there at Fight Ready.
Yeah, I mean, interesting turn of events. I would love to see those guys run it back again. I know that's not going to happen, but Demetrius Johnson, one of my favorite fighters ever. Talk about one of the worst trades ever. Like, that's like you know, like the only time an MMA trade has really ever happened to my knowledge, and it was horrible. Ben Askren did not like turn out to be anything.
I think it worked out for both organizations. I think the UFC was ready to part ways with I mean, look, we look what the flyweight division at that point.
Yeah.
It went all the way down. It did not surprise me. So, of course, if you got any questions, be sure to hit those up in the chat. We'll answer those questions throughout the show. But, Pete, we got 15 fights to break down. We got a ton of fights to break down here. We'll be here for probably about the next 45 to hour. So if you got any questions, be sure to line that up. And, of course, a great way to show your support for myself and Pete. Hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button. It really does help us out a lot as well. Let's get right into our main event. It is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland, a slight betting favorite in this one. He's $8,500 on DK. $21 over on FanDuel. For Stephen Thompson, he's $17 on FanDuel, $7,700 over at DraftKings. And, look, I thought maybe we'd see some bigger prize pools over at FanDuel this week. Nope, that is not the case. That is not the case. Let's just say I may have screenshotted the feed and might have said a couple of things. About it. Look, and let me just, full on transparency. I have reserved a bunch of contests on DK. I've not made one lineup yet.
Yeah. I'm still waiting as well. I love Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He might be my favorite MMA fighter out there, just because he comes from a similar background that I do. Point karate, turned to kickboxing, turned to MMA. Basically the same path that I've gone, outside of, having the success that Stephen Thompson has had. He's incredible. So I really like Stephen Thompson. I've been really, really accurate with how his fights are going to go. I feel like I have a very good read on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Called the Bilal Muhammad fight. I remember a lot of people were off Bilal Muhammad in that matchup. That's hindsight's 2020, and you see what Bilal has really done within the division. Called the Jeff Neal fight. Believe I called the Gilbert Burns fight. So I have a pretty good read on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, I think this is going to be a competitive bout until a sequence is landed by Kevin Holland. I see Kevin Holland landing something, and I actually see Kevin Holland hurting Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Even if it's on the exit of a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson blitz, I just see something, and it might happen in the clinch. Not to mention that Kevin Holland has the X factor to take the fight to the mat. Stephen Thompson can defend some takedowns, but I do think that there is a submission gap between them, and Kevin Holland can clearly get a club and sub here. And it pains me to say, I am going to be picking Kevin Holland here at 8,500. Not a priority fight for me, just because I think anybody when they fight Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, it's a lower output, more methodical type of fight. Thompson will, make you decrease your volume, make you be selective because of the stance, the footwork, the evasiveness. I do think that something lands over 25 minutes, and I think Kevin Holland's going to be victorious.
We are now down to 14 fights, Pete.
Oh, what happened? Right now?
Yes. Within the last 15 minutes, as we were literally setting up the show, the UFC announced that Tracy Cortez versus Amanda Ribas is off the fight card. Medical issue for Tracy Cortez.
That's sad. But that's the 8,200, 8,000 fight?
That was. And that was a fight. Look, me and Pete, we're texting throughout the week, and I know that was a fight that the line had really stuck out to you.
Yeah, the physicality of Tracy Cortez, the wrestling, that I don't know, man. When I saw Ribas get exposed, it made it interesting for me. I like the card better without the fight, to be honest, from a DFS standpoint. The 8,200, 8,000 fight is always a headache. So that's cool in that aspect. I hope that she's all right. But now we have a smaller card, which is going to help things out, especially because 8,200, 8,000 is so chalky.
Well, look, as I look at this fight card, Pete, that there are multiple fights from a DFS perspective that I'm not big on. And main event's one of them. Yeah, I can see the main event, Kevin talking about how the potentially a snooze fest, they stand 6 feet apart for 5 rounds. I mean, look, and I feel like when we're talking about a point karate style, sport karate type fighter, I'm doing a show with the right guy to talk about this style. Yeah, look, Stephen Thompson he's a counterpuncher. And if he gets knocked out, I truly feel it is going to come from a right hand from Kevin Holland.
Yeah, I can see various things, and he's only been. I lost so much money the one time he was knocked out bad against Anthony Pettis. I had the nicest parlay in the world going, Jason, and I remember sitting there. I was gonna win like I don't know 3-4 grand or something on my couch, and for me that was a lot. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, he dominated Anthony Pettis until that silly Superman punch, and that was a bad knockout. And I know like he's been durable since then, but I just wonder about the times that he's been rocked, had an extensive kickboxing career. His style is very good for minimizing damage, but I do feel like Kevin Holland, he's in most of the time he's in wrestling matchups where he has to worry about getting taken down. He holds that ace up his sleeve now. You know what I mean? Like he can literally be free in there. It's going to be a tricky matchup whenever you're going up against Stephen Thompson, but I think he catches Stephen Thompson, and even if he doesn't, I think it's a staring contest and it's not a part of the optimal lineup.
Yeah, I mean, and looking over the prize picks up here, nothing on this fight really sticks out to me. If I was gonna look at anything on prize picks, it might be the fight time. I might. It's 20.
Well, that comes down to, do you think? I think if Kevin Holland finds a stoppage, I think it's sooner than that.
I agree.
Because he's a very aggressive. And I don't know why I'm seeing it happen in the clinch. I'm seeing like a knee to the body followed by an elbow, similar to how he did it to Anthony Hernandez. That's kind of what I'm seeing when, Stephen Thompson's so worried about getting taken down. But if you think it's going to be a staring contest, I think you play the over all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, significant strikes is 80.5 on Kevin Holland. If I had to go one way or the other, I'd probably go under.
Okay.
Because I think he's going to have to be the aggressor because we know what Wonder Boy does. In a fantasy score, 90.5. 5-round fight, he probably gets there.
I don't know if he does.
But I don't love any of those props over prize picks on that fight. There are other props I do love over prize picks, and one of them's in the co-main event. Rafael Dos Anjos and Brian Barberena. Unfortunately, if you would have played this prop earlier in the week, you got a better number. It was Rafael Dos Anjos takedowns landed 2.5. Love the over. I still love the over at 3 because, look, it is the clear path of RDA winning the fight. Like, there are 2 fights on this card that I really look at from a fight IQ aspect and say, if the fighter goes a takedown route, they should be able to land a ton of takedowns. Mm-hmm. I think you probably know who the other one is. I don't think it's hard to figure out, honestly. Yep. I think most people could probably figure out who it is pretty quickly. But RDA, it's a big price point on DraftKings at $9,600, $6,600 for Barberena. Over on FanDuel, $8 for Barberena, $23 for RDA. Look, when I first saw the betting line on this, I was like, "Whoo, man, that's a big number." And I was like, "Okay, Barberena can make this a brawl. Maybe he catches RDA." But then I keep thinking about this, P, and I go, RDA is a smart fighter. Like, RDA is one of these guys. It's either he's the guy taking you to the ground or he goes up against a better grappler and they constantly take him to the ground.
Yeah. I think that RDA has that championship fight IQ. You know what I mean? Like, he's so smart. He's so talented in all areas of the fight. Even against Rafael Fiziev. He attempted 16 takedown attempts prior to that against Renato Moicano, who's a monster on the mat, attempted 15. Paul Felder, short notice, weird fight, 22 takedown attempts. So the volume is there. The volume is completely there. And the one issue I do have with this fight is that it's a 3-round bout. RDA is somewhat accustomed to going 5-round bouts, headlining events. So you got to get off to a hot start and not kind of like stall out the gate. And don't allow Brian Barberena to have any momentum. The issue with the 3-round bout is just the, kind of the cap on how many takedowns and control time he can have over 15 minutes. He could still break the slate, but he's supposed to break the slate, right? Like at 9,600, that's what he's supposed to do. I think that he goes out there and puts together a strong performance. I might be underweight to it. I just might. Just 9,600 is super rich, and there are so many other fights that, we could get some high scores. I do expect him to have a very high score. It's just at that price with the other combinations and, lineup construction, I'll have to see what the ownership's like. Because if it comes in massive, I'm just going to be either neutral or slightly below. I'm looking at the ownership right now, and I'm probably going to be below that, to be honest, Jason.
Well, I mean, it's one of these things of, as I think about this fight card, more times than not, when I see a 9,600 price point, my first thought's going to be, oh man, what's this going to do to my lineup construction?
Right.
But with having now 14 fights and looking at those fighters that are 7,400 and below, I'm like, I don't think it would be hard to get to him. Like, if I'm playing in, say, a 3 max, I'm going to get at least one of those 3 lineups with RDA in there. In a 20 max, 30 to 35, maybe 40.
I think cash you have to, right? Like he's
yeah.
safe.
Oh yeah. Oh, cash game. Yeah. Yes.
And you're the cash king over there. Like I mean, I think that he's probably the safest with the highest.
This is my advice to people. You want to build a bankroll? Just play head to heads. Just play head to heads. I'm telling you.
You might see me in some head to heads this week.
Let's just say, but do well in the head to heads this week in the NBA.
Just don't select my name. Just let me win. All right.
Hey, look, man. This is. By the way, last UFC card was our first late swap, and of course, we lose a fight in the middle of the show.
What a disaster! Like, the pivot for me was to somebody who I didn't want to pivot to. I had zero faith in that person. I forget who it is. Chat, remind us if you remember. You had to pivot to somebody, and I was like, I don't like this person at all. And he ended up getting 0.4 points or something stupid. I forget who it was, but it was a complete disaster.
Yeah, I mean, look, so I'm going to a 40th birthday party on Saturday night, so I'm not gonna be able to late swap. Like, my lineups are gonna be what my lineups are. So God hope no one falls off this card once we hit that first fight.
Yeah. Sometimes you're better off. I think you're better off just not tinkering with it. Obviously, if you have somebody who's out, you have to get him out of there. But think a strategy could be avoiding the switches. I don't know. We'll see. I actually think that late swap is going to get fixed because this is weird.
Yeah, I mean, now in terms of this co-main event, if you are looking to play Bryan Barberena, the thought process has got to be that he can kind of weather, say a 2-round storm of takedowns, maybe wear down RDA, and in the 3rd round he can try to make this a brawl. I don't see a way Bryan Barberena wins this fight without making it a brawl.
Yeah, I don't see him winning this fight. I remember we were discussing and possibly talking about Anthony Ivy beating Bryan Barberena. Now we're talking about Rafael Dos Anjos beating him. I just see a resume completely different than Bryan Barberena. And Rafael Dos Anjos is so superior to Bryan Barberena outside of a brawl. Brawl is like 50-50, flip a coin. But skill and everywhere, you got Rafael Dos Anjos, who's an A, and you have Bryan Barberena, who's a B- in other categories.
Next up, we got that flyweight matchup between Matthias Nicolai and Matt Schnell. Nicolai 9,400, 6,800 for Schnell. Over on FanDuel, we got $22 for Nicolai, $9 for Matt Schnell. This is one of those fights where I thought you did a great job at beginning of the show talking about, for the most part, flyweight matchups tend to be matchups that you're just not really in love with from a daily fantasy perspective. I think this is a different thought process here because, I mean, look, Matt Schnell, whether he's the hammer or the nail, and sometimes he's the nail that then becomes the hammer, this is one of those ones that, as a punt play, I don't mind getting the Matt Schnell. I think this fight is closer than what the betting odds say it is.
I think it is from a skill standpoint, and you'll hear me say that a lot because I do think that Matt Schnell is really, really skilled. I've always said that he's skilled. He can strike really well. His jiu-jitsu is sneaky. He can put everything together. his durability kind of abandons him throughout his matchups, and that's something you really can't control. 9,400 price tag on a flyweight typically is something I would avoid and say they have one of the highest decision rates on the entire slate. And I don't think that Matheus Nicolau is one of the guys who, in a decision win, actually performs to a 9,400 salary. I think that his path to performing at a 9,400 salary is picking up, some knockdowns. We have seen him pick up some knockdowns in the past. He picked one up over David Dvorak. He picked 3 up against Louis Smolka. And then in his debut, he picked 2 up against Bruno Correa. I don't even know who Bruno Correa is. I'd have to really go back and see. But the point is that he hits pretty damn hard for the flyweight division. And you have Matt Schnell getting rocked at all times. So I get it. I get the odds. And I actually think that Matheus Nicolau is going to win in pretty dominant fashion. I think it's going to be like a breakout party for him in a way. It's just that flyweight fear I have of you paid up for what reason for a division that is predominantly decision fighters.
Looking at the prop bets across the board, Matheus Nicolau wins inside distance plus 110, plus 120.
That's crazy for a flyweight. That is crazy for a flyweight.
Yeah. Schnell inside distance. Look, if you want to be a Matt Schnell backer and you live in a state where, if you live in Ontario, well, you can't bet on UFC fights anymore, or at least crazy for the time being. Matt Schnell wins inside distance plus 650. Schnell wins by submission plus 1,100. I'm going to see as high as plus 1,500 on that, looking across the board here. Schnell via TKO KO plus 1,200, seeing as high as plus 1,400. This is what I think it's with Matt Schnell. It's like, man, we've seen him get rocked and somehow come back. This is a fight that I think you probably have to target from a DFS perspective on both sides. Ooh. But do you feel great about, saying you got to roster a flyweight fight? No, of course you don't.
I mean, I'm going to have Matheus Nicolau in my player pool. It's not a fighter I'm building around. I will probably make a portion of Matheus Nicolau, lineups, because I think naturally he's going to come in as one of the most underweight 9,000 options because of everybody's rightful fears, same fears that I have. But that's a contrarian pay up option that could actually work out. So, because I do think that, I think he's going to pick up a win, but even in a finish, right? Like sometimes we see people get finishes, knockouts, second round, first round after the fast finish bonus, and they still don't really pay off that salary. So if he gets 100 points flat and 9,400, I still don't think that's it.
Looking over at the Prize Picks props on this one, the one that sticks out to me is the takedowns landed. Matheus Nicolau 1.5. Pete, can you sell me not to just go hammer the over here?
I mean, for me, he attempted 9 against Manel Kopp. I would expect he'd have to have some trouble on the feet, because if I'm a part of Matheus Nicolau's camp, it's like touch that chin, man. Just touch that chin. But if he does start to have some problems with the strikes coming back his way, maybe that's why he would attempt more takedowns. I might actually tell you not to do that. I think that he's just going to try to get that knockout over Matt Schnell.
You got significant strikes land for Nicolau, 44.5. Fight time, 12.5. Fantasy score, which is typically a category I really don't go too much on Prize Picks. That's at 90.5. I mean, I could see where someone says, hey, if you're looking to touch that chin, maybe you look at that 44.5 number.
Yeah, and then you're kind of like playing with fire. It's like, can Schnell absorb 44 strikes? Yeah, I think he can. Maybe you go with the under. Maybe.
Are you thinking under 12.5 fight time minutes then?
I'm probably going to go to that fantasy score, and that's a spot where I don't go to, but I'm probably going to go to that fantasy score.
There is a fantasy score prop that I will talk about later on in the show. I got to remember who it was. Yeah, okay, I know who it is. But there is one spot on the fantasy score that does stick out to me. It's on a prelim fight. It's very early on the card, and it's not the first fight. It's not the first fight, but it's very early on in the card. Let's move over. Next up, we got the heavyweights, Tuivasa and Sergey Pavlovich. Tuivasa 7,200, Pavlovich 9,000 over on DK. 19 for Pavlovich, 11 for Tuivasa. Tuivasa, maybe he's just going to become Florida man at this point for this week here in Orlando. This is, look, Pete, I feel like this is a fight that you got to target for DFS on both sides of the equation. We all know what Tuivasa can do with his power. If I was going to put a question mark, I do kind of go, is he coming back a little too quick after that knockout loss to Cyril Gane? That kind of sticks out to me. Sergey Pavlovich, outside of that win against Derek Lewis, let's be honest about it, it's against low-level competition in the UFC, and the loss did come against Alistair Overeem. What was that, 2017, 2018? I want to say somewhere in there. Look, for Tuivasa, I just feel like if he is able to incorporate leg kicks, that will be ultimately his key to potentially getting a knockout.
Yeah, I mean, if you were just to look at this card as a whole, a lot of times just targeting the opposite side in women's MMA and heavyweight MMA, I would love to see what the winning percentage is, just because of how volatile and how, on any given day, we can see these fighters on the opposite fights just go in there and show out. And heavyweights seem to be very popular of underdogs spoiling it. Same with women's MMA. I personally, I'm not going to get to too much Tai Tuivasa. I'm going to get to some just because he's a heavyweight underdog. I do think that the powerful straight shots of Sergey Pavlovich are going to find the chin of Tai Tuivasa. I like Tai. I like him a lot. I think he's overperforming, truthfully. I don't want to be a hater. I like Tai Tuivasa a lot, but I feel like he's picked up a lot of wins where it's like, it blows my mind. It really blows my mind. Derek Lewis fight blew my mind. The Greg Hardy when he was already rocked, it's just weird. The success, he goes out there and just being aggressive is sometimes the best offense. And instead of going out there, being aggressive is the best defense sometimes. He does have a chin, but he makes a ton of mistakes technically. And I do think that a guy who's so much of a technician in Sergey Pavlovich could take advantage of a situation like this. So give me Sergey Pavlovich at 9,000, but priority fight, circle this fight, include it in your lineups. I actually think that it's going to be over in one.
I was actually going to bring this up to you. And if I was going to put potential criticisms of Sergey Pavlovich, a potential criticism I think you could have is, if you tell me this fight hits the second round, you tell me this fight has a third round, I have more faith in Tuivasa at that point.
It's fair. It is fair. And I think that's something Ty's camp should have said, or should say, is like, if he comes out hot out the gate, let's weather that storm and let's start to, in the first round, just chip away at those legs, really break the base of him, throw your combinations still, but be careful, especially on the exit, and careful of not just blindly throwing the kicks so that you don't get hit with a shot down the middle. Yeah. But I do think that the later this fight goes, it's pretty easy to want to back Tai Tuivasa, who we've seen more outside of round one than a guy in Sergey Pavlovich.
Okay. Take your fire DFS analysis hat off.
Yep.
Just a fan of the sport. Come on. You don't want to see Tai Tuivasa jump up on that cage and just do a shoey.
I like Tai Tuivasa. I do like Tai Tuivasa. I mean, he's really just like, a lot of people can relate to him because he's a normal looking guy. He's not in the best physical shape. He's fun. He's funny. He's a great personality. There would be nothing better than to have a success story like that, especially in the heavyweight division. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty damn cool.
So where the Amway Center is located?
Yep.
It's in downtown Orlando, and it is in the Church Street district. Church Street is the bar district.
Oh Lord, they knew what they were doing with Tai Tuivasa.
Good Lord, could you imagine if Tai Tuivasa wins? you know Tuivasa is going to be just rolling on Church Street. And
You better go down there.
God knows how many shoeies will be done just him walking down the street.
If he wins, you better if you're not doing anything, you better go party with Tai Tuivasa.
I'm going to a 40th
Oh, that's
birthday
right.
party. So
Oh, that's right.
yeah. No, it's I don't think the wife's going to let me drive 90 minutes to just go. Yeah, that ain't happening.
That's not happening.
that is definitely not happening. But look, this is from a DFS perspective, I think you have to target this one. I could see very well if people want to get Todd Tuivasa, that's your easy way then to get to RDA in terms of a roster construction situation there. Over at Prize Picks, 22.5 significant strikes land is for Sergey. 5 minutes on fight time and 96.5 fantasy score. Any of those stick out to you?
I mean, I like the over and the significant strikes, more significant strikes than that for Sergey Pavlovich, but I don't love that because it's heavyweight MMA at the same time. Like I think that Ty's tough enough to absorb some shots, but I feel like it could be like 19. You know what I mean? Like it's close, but I'd probably just target what's the fight time on that?
5.
E.
Yeah, E. Yeah, that's about.
If it was 7.5, I would do it. If it was 7.5, I would do it all day.
Yeah, you're not getting that number. Let's move over to the next up. We got Jack Hermanson taking on Roman Dolidze. 8,700 for Hermanson, 7,500 for Dolidze. 18 and 12 respectively over there on FanDuel, and only 2 props over at Prize Picks on Jack Hermanson. 56.5 significant strikes landed and a fantasy score of 80.5. This is why I love doing the show with you, because you can bring this fire perspective. So Roman Dolidze comes in here on short notice. I want to say he took this fight within the last 10 days or so. He replaces Derek Brunson, a southpaw. If you're Roman Dolidze's camp, is the mindset we need to make sure we're fighting orthodox the whole time?
I mean, if it was the opposite, I would probably say, so like if Hermanson was training to fight an orthodox fighter, you could switch things up and say, hey, we can go southpaw. I mean, a lot of people struggle when you go southpaw facing a lefty. Like, in boxing, it's a big deal. A lot of people will not accept fights against lefties because fighting a lefty is a completely different thing. But going southpaw when he was already training for southpaw, okay. So now going orthodox, which is something he's already really accustomed to, I don't really think it's anything. If it was the opposite, I would agree with you. But maybe mixing things up, switching stances against the guy where Derek Brunson's predominantly just from southpaw, switching, giving different looks and different reads on both sides, I think would be the answer to that.
Now, this is a contrast of styles between these two guys, where you got Jack Hermanson, where he's going to throw volume.
Yeah.
Other side, Roman Dolidze, he's literally putting that foot in the ground and looking to give you 100-mile-an-hour fastball a couple of times in a fight. Like, that is the part that does intrigue me about Dolidze from a DFS perspective, because, I mean, look, we're trying to get to 650 points over on DraftKings. We need guys who have that potentially 100-plus points. But I could very easily see that just Jack Hermanson dancing around him, just, peppers them with the jab and, cruises his way to a 15-minute decision.
Yeah, admittedly, this is the hardest fight for me to break down. It is, because, like, I really like Jack Hermanson. I actually think that he's a pretty good striker. Good volume striker. I love his guillotines. I kind of like mimicked a lot of my game on the mat to what he can do, because he's such a guillotine hunter and just hunts that head and arm so well. The issue is I don't think that's really going to happen against Roman Dolidze, who's an accomplished grappler and super strong. If the fight goes longer and Dolidze gets tired and fatigued and gets sloppy, that's where I do think a guillotine of Jack Hermanson can happen. But like the power and the physicality of Roman Dolidze for this division is something to be said. I think that the clinch fighting is something that's super underrated for him. And if you can just look at the Dawkins fight, and it's pretty evident that he likes to, work his way into the clinch and get that control position, incorporate some hard shots back to control. I want to know who the better wrestler here is, because if Jack Hermanson was a little bit more physical and a bigger guy, I think that he would ragdoll Roman Dolidze. I really do. But I think that this could be where like Dolidze looks like he's a weight class bigger than him, and just the short notice nature of it makes me kind of hesitate on this fight and can't really pull a trigger on who I'm backing with planting my flag. I'm gonna lean the underdog in Roman Dolidze just because of the power, the physicality, everything I already just said. 7,500. I mean, he's 5-1. He's on a roll. Jack Hermanson is his best performances behind him in a way. Is he a little gun shy in certain matchups because he's worried about getting finished? He has not had success in the takedown department his past 2 fights. 0 of 6 against Chris Curtis, 0 of 8 against Sean Strickland. So I'm gonna lean with Roman Dolidze here.
Yeah, I do lean from an underdog perspective looking to get to him, but I will say we're at Prize Picks. I do like the over 56.5 significant strikes for Jack Hermanson, just thinking that this fight goes 15 minutes. And I mean, look, he's a volume puncher, and that's where it leans there. But I don't know how much I would get to Jack Hermanson in this spot. So we'll see there. Of course, you got any questions, sort of line up in chat. You just got Kevin there. Who all missed weight, and how do you feel that affects those fights? I missed the weigh-ins. The one fighter to miss weight was Phil Rowe. The fight will go on. Phil Rowe is giving up 30% of his purse for that fight to continue.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's okay. You're like, jeez.
Yeah, 30's a lot. we need every single dollar. 30's a lot, but I didn't see anything that made me like worry about he had a bad weight cut. Sometimes you just you pull it out before like it gets too bad.
That's what it looked like to me. It looks like someone's like, you know what, we're not going to cut these final 2 pounds, so let's not put you in worse condition. Let's just get on the scale and let's see if we can come to an agreement. Now, look, if I'm in the management of Nico Price, yeah, I'm asking for 30%.
At least.
You have to. I mean, like, I remember this was back in the day when Melvin Guillard was fighting Justin Gaethje in the World Series of Fighting, and Guillard misses weight. It was a sizable weight miss.
7 pounds, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't close. And I remember Trevor Whitman come down, and I'm standing there, and he goes, "Yeah, we just cut a deal." I go, "Okay." He goes, "Yeah, Melvin's getting 50% of his purse." I was like, "Holy cow!"
What an expensive mistake. Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
and then you gotta go, and then you still gotta fight, and then how bad did Gaethje destroy him in that fight?
Pretty bad, yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah. So you lost 50% of your money, and you got beaten.
Gaethje destroyed a lot of people in the World Series of Fighting.
Yeah,
exactly. Destroys a lot of people in the UFC too. I mean,
sure does.
Yeah, there's a reason. But I mean, like, look, in terms of how it affects, I mean, it's really a case by case basis. I mean, I don't think you can take a hard stance one way or the other. It's just gonna be how that fighter, is it a situation where the team just said, you know what, we're stopping the cut. We're just not going to risk it, or is it a situation where sometimes a fighter makes weight, but they just dehydrate their body so much. Now, the one thing that is very beneficial for this one is, so the weigh-ins were 9 a.m. this morning. The fights don't start till 7 p.m. tomorrow. So think about this. Kevin Holland and Stephen Thompson stepped on a scale probably 9:30 this morning. They're not stepping into the octagon tomorrow night till probably midnight.
Yeah, a day and a half, basically. So, I mean, I would say that if a wrestler missed weight, I want to look at that under a microscope, because sometimes that can hold an advantage in grappling situations when they're going to be the heavier guy. This situation and this matchup between Nico Price and Phil Rowe is not one of them. I'm expecting it to remain on the feet for the most part. So I think it's completely irrelevant.
I mean, look, I'll put any question up on the screen. Who would you rather be? Barberina having to go against Rafael Dos Anjos or James Krause dealing with his stuff? That is very simple. You much rather be Brian Barberina.
Yeah, I mean,
look,
you're gonna get paid.
Yeah, and look, and we're going to talk about James Krause in a little bit because it does relate to one of the fights on here. But
it's a great question.
But the thing that I will say is this: look, this is a major story in mixed martial arts. There's no question about it. I mean, if you live in Ontario, now you can't legally bet on the fights. You live in Jersey, you're not going to be able to bet on the Marcelo Rojo fight in that one. And I've said this on my show. I'm not making any assumptions. I'm basing on the facts we know. And for right now, yeah, it doesn't look good for James Krause. I mean, we can't. It just doesn't. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it here. The one thing I will say is, if this was an NBA show, an MLB show, an NHL, an NFL show, I think this story is much more talked about than it's being talked about in the MMA circles. I will tell you, I've talked to some interesting people over the past 2 weeks. And I mean, look, time is going to tell what happened. But, I think at the end of the day, one of the issues that not just the UFC has to deal with, Bellator has to deal with, the PFL has to deal with, any organization that has lines on their fights is inside information. Yeah. And I mean, look, there was an article that Mark Raimondi wrote a couple of weeks ago that it's an unnamed coach talking about how he saw someone warming up and he didn't look good and he made a bet.
That's different, though. To me, that's different. Like, there's no way you're going to be able to delegate that. That's different to me. But if my fighter, I'm cool with Jason. My fighter's been nursing a shoulder injury. We haven't done anything outside of running.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, 15 minutes before the fight, you tell your friend or you hammer that line, that's a problem. You know what I'm saying? Especially like if I'm telling you against my guy, like that's ridiculous. If anything, you should be biased in supporting somebody. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, that's Pete's boy. I'm going to, but this is ridiculous. Like, and this situation is going to set the standard for all mixed martial arts betting going forward. Like, this is going to be a staple situation going forward. Like, how like in school you read the history books, like this is going to be that type of situation for MMA betting going forward.
Look, I think the UFC is trying to be very proactive on it. There are things that other leagues have done. The UFC is taking those steps. I don't know what the solution is for the UFC, especially when you see that statement from the Ontario Commission, Gaming Commission. And we're going to see how this thing plays out. It seems like this thing takes a twist or turn every couple of days, and so we'll see it. But we will. Because I'm going to ask Pete a question related to Marcelo Rojo when we get to that fight. Let's move over. Next up, we got Eric Anders taking on Kyle Daukaus. Eric Anders, he is 7,100, 9,100 for Kyle Daukaus, 11 and 19 respectively over there on FanDuel. Looking at Prize Picks. Significant strikes for Kyle Daukaus, 45.5. Takedowns landed 1.5, and a fantasy score of 83.5. Eric Anders, up and down guy. You got, since he's coming to the UFC, one thing that always kind of concerns me with Eric Anders is a lack of volume. And that is something that's always going to be a concern when we're talking about developing DFS lineups.
Yeah. I mean, like, when it comes to Eric Anders, my thought process on Eric Anders is just like no urgency. And I think urgency is really, really important when building lineups because we want to tailor it around urgent fighters that go out there and try to get a quick paycheck or at least have a strategy and game plan, in place where they are putting together some volume. And last fight was pretty interesting against Young Park because you had Eric Anders, attempting 24 takedowns, which is like career most, landing 3 of them. So that takedown volume and attempts is something that's super, super interesting in this fight against Daukaus. I actually think that this is a nice fight for Kyle Daukaus because I don't expect Eric Anders to finish him here. It could happen because if you look at, their previous bouts, Kyle Daukaus has not really had the best success in the UFC. And yet he's always a favorite, or at least it seems to be.
Yeah.
Like favorite against Roman Dolidze, Jamie Pickett, Phil Hawes, Dustin Stoltzfus, only in 2 of his fights against Brendan Allen, who's a stud in his debut, and Kevin Holland, was he an underdog. A lot of people like the skill set. A lot of people like the frame of Kyle Daukaus. I'm one of them. I think that his boxing's good. His offensive submission skills are excellent. He just needs to avoid getting hit, hurt, and finished. And good for him in this matchup. I don't think that Eric Anders is a guy who's super, super dangerous. Outside of the wars with Darren Stewart, I think that this fight's going to go long. So give me Kyle Daukaus at 9,100. I will have lineups with Eric Anders at 7,100, no problem at all, just because of the struggles of Daukaus in the UFC. But I do think that Daukaus is just going to be able to be the better fighter over 15 minutes.
I like that prop bet. It's not, you're not getting great juice on it, but Daukaus winning via decision plus 140. Yep. You know, I gotta imagine he's gonna want to try to get the fight to the ground. I don't know if I want to go the over 1.5 takedowns. I might more lean taking that over 45.5 significant strikes over at Prize Picks.
Yeah, I really like that decision prop. That's how I foresee the fight going. Both tough guys. You know, it's going to be close in certain situations and scrambles, but I do think that Daukaus can be the better fighter over 15.
Are you with me that Nico Price and Phil Rowe is a fight that we have to target?
Yep, similar to the Sergey Pavlovich and Tai Tuivasa. Okay. Two fights I just don't expect to go the distance, and a little volatility on both sides. So this is going to be a priority play for me, and I really like the matchup.
Let me ask you this, though. If you are, whether you're placing a bet on Phil Rowe or you got Phil Rowe in your DFS lineup, I feel like we might be sweating out a potential bad first round.
It could happen. But, you know, Nico Price hasn't really looked like Nico Price of late. You know, if you go back a couple years, I would totally agree with you. But the physicality, the length of Phil Rowe could actually stop Nico Price in his tracks. And that's where you could be like, not so worried. But Phil Rowe has been hit and hurt, you know, in a lot of his fights as well. Like, you go back and look at Gabe Green performance. You know, cat's out the bag. I'm back in Phil Rowe, but I'm almost getting to 100% of this fight just because of how I foresee it going. It's a welterweight division against two guys who go out there and put it all on the line. And I do think that the length of Phil Rowe is going to give Nico Price some big problems here. And I think it's going to end within 2 rounds. So we have Phil Rowe working with my striking coach that I met out at Jackson's in Dam Sudyod. And I will say might be one of the best Muay Thai coaches I've ever come across. Fantastic coach. Coach. So I cannot even, like, for me to say somebody's a very, like, one of the best striking coaches I've ever seen, he's phenomenal. Like, absolutely phenomenal. And when I go visit you down in Florida, I'm stopping at his gym all the time.
You know, Nico Price, wild man. He can definitely be a wild man here. I'm with you there. I was kind of surprised the fight time of 10 minutes because I will say from the betting side, I think this may be a better live betting opportunity than it is taking the money line as the fight goes. But look, I'm with you. I think you got to get to this fight. Let's move over. Next up, we got a female matchup between Angela Hill and Emily Ducote. Ducote 8,300, 7,900 for Angela Hill. Then over on FanDuel, 16 for Ducote, $15 for Angela Hill here. And over at Prize Picks, 70.5 significant strikes for Ducote and a fantasy score of 73.5. Woody, I appreciate you checking in. And of course, if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment. Myself or Pete will get back to you in the comments as well. Angela Hill, like, look, do I just go find what is the Ducote or Angela Hill wins via split decision prop?
Yeah, right.
Let me go pull up here. Let's see. Do we got a split decision prop over here? We do. Hill wins via split or majority decision. Plus 700. Same on Emily Ducote. Why do I feel like you just put, if you live in a state where you can legally place a bet, I feel like that is you got to throw a sprinkle on that one.
Yeah. A little small money on that. You know, might as well. I think it's going to be a close matchup. Usually I'm always worried about Angela Hill when she's going up against strong grapplers, but it's proven that she's, you know, developed her game to a point to defend enough, get back to her feet, and start to get back to her volume striking. And, you know, her volume striking in the past seemed to be a lot higher. It's still pretty high. You know, and as long as she's not controlled on the mat, I like her to win here. against Emily Ducote. So 7,900. I'm cool with getting to Angela Hill as long as it remains on the feet. Emily Ducote having that strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in her back pocket, makes me hesitate a little bit on pulling the trigger a little bit more aggressively. But I'm going to pick Angela Hill here. I mean, she has a 9-12 UFC resume, and this is Emily Ducote's second UFC fight. I just think it's a little too much too soon, even though Angela Hill doesn't have the best success rate in the UFC.
Yeah, when you're talking about Emily Ducote, she works with Rafael Lovato Jr. For people who do not know,
Yeah.
he's pretty damn amazing at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, nasty. Absolutely nasty. So as long as this remains on the feet, I think it suits Angela Hill. Once it starts hitting the mat, like I could see, Ducote picking up a submission win relatively easily because of the pedigree of jiu-jitsu that she comes from.
Before we move over to our next matchup, bring us a question where Kevin says, a little off topic, Pete. We all know you're Romanov love, but after his recent fights, you still think he has a high ceiling in the UFC like Aspinall. I love his style, but man, he needs that cardio work.
I mean, it's still at the end of the day, it's heavyweight. So I think that, finding a Cain Velasquez, somebody who can just sustain a pace for 25 minutes, is a rarity. I do think that he's aware and his coaching staff is aware. But I mean, I think he's improved on that compared to how it used to be, where he was like a round one only guy. And I think we're starting to see that possible championship cardio coming around. I do think that there are plenty of matchups that are horrible for him because I don't really love his striking. But he's an absolute animal. And as far as Tom Aspinall, I hate injuries. And injuries take out some of the best prospects in the sport. And, you had that happen to Alexander Rakic, and now we have it to Tom Aspinall. So it pains me. But I hope that Aspinall returns. Sometimes with these big, devastating injuries, you really never know.
Let's move over next up as we have got a match between Clay Guida and Scott Holtzman. Clay Guida, 7,600. Scott Holtzman, 8,600 over on FanDuel. $18 for Holtzman, $13 for Guida. This is another fight that I really don't love for DFS, but I understand why people may get there. Holtzman coming off the knockout losses. It's been a long layoff for him. Clay Guida, a veteran of this sport. But this is just like, I feel like I want to put this in the category of I don't really trust the list.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? Like,
yeah.
It makes people want to go right to Clay Guida, and I was one of them when I was kind of looking at this card firsthand, and just because of the overhand. I know he's old, but I mean, just one big overhand, test that chin of Scott Holtzman, and it could be over. He can also push a wrestling pace that not a lot of people can really keep up with. I don't know how Scott Holtzman is going to look after back-to-back KO defeats. And granted, it is against Mateusz Gamrot and Beneil Dariush, so killers within the division. And you have Clay Guida losing to Claudio Puelles and picking up a win over Leonardo Santos, and then losing to Mark Madsen. So I do think that, at this moment, Scott Holtzman is still better than Clay Guida, but they are both far removed from their prime. And whenever you have a situation like that occur, I mean, one swing of a right hand can change everything. So I'll be picking Scott Holtzman, but I don't hate on anybody who's getting to Clay Guida. Holtzman's in kind of like a complete contrarian play because I don't think many people are going to want to play him. Back-to-back KO defeats. How does he win? Can he actually finish Clay Guida? I think he can sprawl en route to some heavy ground and pound. I really do. And if nobody's getting to him, I think that I might, take a contrarian stand. It seems like this could be a snoozer of a fight, but I'm willing to take a shot on Scott Holtzman.
Important question here. Would you let your dad go Jason Guida on you like he does to his brother Clay before a fight?
I mean, he does. I mean, not all the time, but he slapped the hell out of me in the back sometimes. But it's good. It wakes you up. We don't got to do it in front of everybody. I go out. For me, I'm different. I'm full sparring in the back. That's how I warm up. I full spar in the back, and then when I go out there, I'm ready for rounds 6, 7, and 8. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, we all know you're shooting double legs in the back. We all know what you do.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, I know. You might tell me that you're going to stand up and strike, and then magically, here's Pete becoming a wrestler.
Hey, man, it was there.
I just bust you. I'm just busting your balls, man. We got the friendly busting balls when we go back and forth here with it.
Absolutely.
Mention about there was a second fight on this card that if it comes to fight IQ, Mark Diakase.
Yeah, you like his fight IQ, right?
Oh God! I mean, this guy has become a wrestler. He's coming to US and he's become a wrestler. I even like the over 3 takedown props over on Prize Picks, because if he wins this fight, it's him chaining takedowns against Michael Johnson. Now, if he decides to keep this, this is odd matchmaking. You're Michael Johnson. Why did you take this fight?
I don't know, man. Why do any of these guys take?
No, if you're the UFC, why are you booking this fight? Like, if you tell me Michael Johnson is fighting somebody, I want to see someone that's going to go toe-to-toe with him on the feet.
You ready for this? Hold on. Are they even the same division? Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Tell me if you like this fight. Just off the top of my head. Michael Johnson, Brad Riddell.
Oh, love it. Well, Riddell's kind of
but
he's not using the R word. He's taking a break.
But tell me that's not perfect. Both strikers.
Yeah.
Like that's a tailor-made matchup of how like that should go. Not, what are we back in the UFC back in the day? You got strong wrestler against, just striker or boxer even. Doesn't even really strike and throw anything else besides his hands. So it's like, I don't know. I like Michael Johnson because he can win and because of some of these wins that he has. He has that death touch about him. I don't expect him to knock out Mark Diakase here. But I think that he can defend initial takedowns. He will struggle in chain wrestling. Greg Jones is going to have him right in, for the first round of defending takedowns. Mm-hmm. After that first round of defending takedowns, then I think it's all on Michael Johnson. And I actually think he gives in when some of the tough wrestling scrambles happen. He's training a lot with Gilbert Burns, all those guys down at Killcliff FC. I watched a couple rounds between them, and it's kind of like, initial takedowns, he stuffs them well. Yeah. Chain wrestling struggles. Mark Diakase goes out there, attempts 20 takedowns. I bet he lands 5. So I'm still going to pick Mark Diakase here, but this is like a, pick your veteran from an underdog standpoint and just kind of back him. And I don't really hate the Michael Johnson call. It's just like, what's his ceiling? I don't think he knocks him out.
1v1 situation.
Clay Guida him?
No. Diakase or RDA? Yeah, $400 difference.
I'm going to go RDA. I don't think Brian Barberena is good.
I don't think I think RDA could. To me, it becomes a question mark, and maybe it's more of a question mark of who do you give a better chance of being able to get up and then get taken down immediately again.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, it's close. It's a good question. Yeah. It's a very good question.
We got another expensive fight here. Jonathan Pierce at 9,500 taking on Darren Elkins 6,700, 22 and 9 respectively over there on the FanDuel side of the equation. Jonathan Pierce, that takedown prop over on Prize Picks, 3 takedowns. Now, I think he's going to be going for takedowns. But I think the only question is, could he potentially get Darren Elkins out before he gets to that number 3?
I actually think that I like the over on that takedown prop. I actually think that Darren Elkins is schooled enough and talented enough to get back to his feet. Mm-hmm. Something I'm not really sure if Brian Barberena or if what willingness there will be from Michael Johnson. I think he'll get back to his feet, sometimes. But I actually would give Darren Elkins more of a grappling credit because when he has success in the cage, he's incorporating takedowns himself. So I'm going to say that could be a sneaky situation where Jonathan Pierce just racks up more. I know that he's a conditioning freak and he really focuses on his conditioning. Only worry and only, fault I've ever seen is against Christian Rodriguez, leaving that head out there and getting put in numerous guillotine chokes that were seconds to being over. So, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. Darren Elkins is going to have a high floor because he's going to attempt his own takedowns. 17-9 in the UFC, but I do expect that Jonathan Pierce is going to be the better fighter in 2022 and pick up another victory inside the UFC.
I agree with you there. Next up, we got Natan Levy taking on Gennaro Valdez. Valdez, 7,300, 8,900 for Levy, 19-12 over there on FanDuel. I mentioned about there was a fantasy score prop I liked over Prize Picks. This is the fight. I like the over 82.5 on Natan Levy.
Ooh.
He could chain wrestle takedowns and easily beat that number.
Okay, I can see that happening. I'm not a Natan Levy guy. I'm just not. His kicks are great. He takes a lot of people down. He attempted 16 against Mike Breeden, landed 9. So I think that he presents a solid floor. I just do not like his footwork and kind of putting his back to the cage. I'm going to be picking Gennaro Valdez to win the bout because of his physical nature. I think the Entrum gym is a little slept on and is starting to become one of those new gyms that everybody's starting to talk about. Obviously, I'm worried about Valdez getting knocked out against Matt Frevola. But I actually think Valdez can grapple pretty well. That was evident in Dana White's Contender Series. So 7,300 Valdez is going to be my pick. Just because it's more against the Levy than it is like backing Valdez. It's just a matter of, does Levy do enough to win this bout? And then it's the following matchup where, Levy kind of just lays an egg. So we'll see if I'm right with the timing, but I'm going to go Gennaro Valdez.
Yeah, I like Levy in that spot. Next up, Marcelo Rojo taking on Francis Marshall. Marshall taking this fight here on short notice. And here's a question. So Marcelo Rojo trains at Glory MMA and Fitness. My understanding is James Krause will not be in the corner. So I wanted to bring this question up to you, Pete, from a fighter, but also you're a coach. Is it a big deal for him to now be at Glory and now the head man of that gym is not in his corner?
It's a huge deal. I mean, I was having a heart attack when I was stuck in traffic and I couldn't make it I wasn't going to be there in time for some of my guys' grappling match. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a huge deal to have your main coach who can talk you through everything and just be there, even if it's just like a security blanket. Like, you feel good because that's who you prepared with. It's a lonely sport and you kind of don't want to have that abandonment feeling where it's like it's just you. I know it's a solo sport, but the preparation and the team getting you to a point is super important. So I don't know how you can confidently back a fighter who is going solo, not having their headmaster or their head chief corner in with them, especially with all this huge distraction of part of the gym. Like, we don't even know if Krause is at the gym. We don't know what the hell he's doing. He could be in hiding. We don't know.
So I had Miles Johns on my show last week, and the indication I got is that he's still around. I just think from a public perspective, he's, you haven't seen anything from him.
I just still think that it's like, the skeleton in the closet, and it's a huge distraction. Like, even if like people aren't really talking about it at the gym, everybody knows, and it's like weight on everybody's shoulders, So, I mean, I'm going to be backing Francis Marshall here at 8,800. I like his takedown upside. I like his submission upside. I don't think that his striking's all that bad. Marcelo Rojo is easily the toughest fighter that Francis Marshall has faced. So I know a lot of people backing Marcelo Rojo, but I cannot pull the trigger because of, all that stuff surrounding Glory MMA, but also because I think that Francis Marshall can just chain together some takedowns and work towards getting a submission win or a TKO win. Sometimes step-ups in competition don't work out, and you could fade a Dana White's Contender Series alum. But I'm going to plant my flag. I'm going to say that Francis Marshall is going to get it done. He's going to have a really, really high score this week.
Yeah, I would say this in terms of what's going on with Glory. If I was a Glory fighter, I'm picking up the phone.
Yep.
The conversation starts with the matchmaker of your division, whether it's Sean Shelby or Mick Maynard. And then maybe the conversation progressed to Hunter Campbell and Dana White. And the question's got to be is, if you've got a fight scheduled over the next, say, 2-3 months of going, hey, guys, I just got to know, is James Krause going to be allowed to be in my corner?
Right.
Simple question. And as I said, I'm making no assumptions here. But I think if you're a fighter, it's got to be an answer you got to know. It has to be.
Absolutely. I mean, like, that's a really important part. Like, it's especially when he's the main strategist. Like, I love Krause as a coach. He's phenomenal. He's super smart, and he lays out a perfect game plan for his fighters. So what happens when your fighter's not executing it? You have to kind of reel them back in and get them back towards that game plan path.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. And then our first matchup, we got a female matchup. Yasmin taking on Estella. Yasmin, 9,300, 6,900. For Nunez, 20 and 10, respectively. Pete, you trying to get to the first fight here?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I like Yasmin Jauregui. I like her a lot. She might be one of my favorite plays on the entire slate from like a winning standpoint. I feel pretty confident that she's just going to be better than Estella Nunez here. Estella Nunez, fighting out of American Top Team, they're going to prepare you. They're going to try to fix your holes best they can. But Estella Nunez clearly has a grappling deficiency amongst her game. Pretty talented striker. I do think that the speed and volume of Yasmin Jauregui is going to, open up a ton of opportunities. Could lead to a stoppage standing up, but I feel like Yasmin Jauregui is going to get a takedown en route to a finish on the mat. So give me Jauregui at 9,300. Usually in women's MMA, tends to go long. I actually think that she's going to go out there and want to make a statement after, going the distance in her debut against Yasmin Lucindo. So give me Jauregui. I just don't think, one camp. I don't think that American Top Team can really help you out in a matchup like this. I think that Jauregui's skills are just like, on upward trajectory, and she's going to be a name within the division to talk about.
Yeah, we'll see how that one's going to go down. But let's get right into our straight-up fight picks here, Pete. Let's start with the main event. I've gone back and forth on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go Kevin Holland.
I'm going Kevin Holland, and it hurts me to say.
Yeah, but I'm not. I will tell you, I am not confident at all on this one. Then we got the co-main event, RDA and Barberena. It's easy for me. It is RDA.
RDA.
Yeah, no doubt about it for me. Then let's go. We got Nikolai and Matt Schnell.
It's going to be Mateusz Nikolai for me.
Yeah, Nikolai for me as well. Pavlich and Tuivasa. Give me the shoey. Give me Todd Tuivasa with the upset.
Really? Like, you're really picking it, or just like you want it to happen?
I'm really picking it. All
right, I'm going to go Pavlovich.
I think the leg kicks, and also I think this fight gets out of the first round, and I think that's where he takes over.
Okay, I'm going to go Pavlovich.
Jack Hermanson, Roman Dolidze. This is another one I've gone back and forth on. Give me underdog number 2 in Roman Dolidze.
Yeah, Dolidze. Hardest fight for me to call.
Yeah. Then we got Dawkins and Anders. I will go Kyle Dawkins.
Yeah, Dawkins. Price
and Rowe. This is another one I keep going back and forth on. The weight miss is a little bit of a concern for me. But God. I was gonna say Nico Price, but I think I'll go Phil Rowe.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go Phil Rowe, and complete bias. I've seen some footage of Phil Rowe training a lot this camp, and I really like what I'm seeing. So I'm gonna go Phil Rowe. I think that this fight I think is gonna break the slate. So I'm gonna back him.
Next up we got Emily Ducote and Angela Hill. I will go Emily Ducote.
Ooh, I'm gonna go Angela Hill. I just think the volume's gonna be enough to squeak out a decision.
Clay Guida, Scott Holtzman. Give me underdog number 4.
Really?
Clay Guida.
Okay. I don't hate it. A big overhand right wrestler. I'm gonna go Scotty Holtzman.
Dia Casey, easy for me.
Casey.
Pierce. Levy.
Valdez for me.
I will go Marshall. And I will go Yasmin
for me as well.
Well, I mean, like, look, from a DFS perspective, for me, Tuivasa, Pavlovich, Price, Rowe, those would be the 2 fights that are the priority fights for me. Fights that I just really don't want to get to. Anderson, Dawkins. Don't really love Hill Ducote in terms of a GPP. I'd be more looking at that as a cash game play. Takedown City. JKC,
got a couple of them,
and RDA would stick out to me as a top 2.
Yeah, Pierce right there too. I mean, we got a lot of people that can take them to Takedown City. But thanks so much for tuning into the show, guys. I mean, another fight card, and happy to be here breaking it down with my man Jason Floyd. And really appreciate you.
Of course, so as always, we appreciate everyone tuning in for our preview show. Of course, we'll be here on Fridays before every UFC event. Of course, we got a card next week at UFC Vegas 66, and that's a final UFC fight card of the year, Pete.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, UFC is always avoiding the holidays, and they're smart about it.
Yeah, very, very smart. Yeah, when you talk to regional promoters, they'll say, "Yeah, don't do shows in December."
Yeah, not at all.
But yeah, it's of course, as always, we appreciate everyone tuning in for this edition of the podcast. Of course, you can check us out tomorrow over there at Stokastic. So if you want to check us out over there, be sure to do that as well. Of course, we appreciate everyone that has been tuning in for the Fight HQ show. As always, we appreciate you doing that here. So, Pete, anything else you want to break down here?
No, I just want to say thanks so much for watching. Like the video if you guys don't mind. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to have a ton of content. We got solo shows with Jason sometimes with me, and then the duo of us breaking down every UFC card. So tune in to Fight HQ. You guys do not want to miss our content.
Yeah, Bellator next week as well, which I'll give you a little nugget on that one. Danny Sabatello is now self-managed. Found that one out as I reached out to what is now his former management company, because I was trying to get him on the show on Sunday, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't manage him anymore."
Interesting.
Yeah, a little nugget for you there, but of course we appreciate everyone tuning in for this edition of Fight HQ. Of course, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, all that. We appreciate you tuning in for this episode. We will talk to you next week.